Hey everybody. So oftentimes while browsing YouTube and other such sites, you may come across videos that you simply can't explain. Videos whose origins, meanings, and validity are completely unknown, leaving potential viewers completely in the dark. While videos like these are occasionally resolved by the resurfacing of individuals involved in them, it's far more common for these videos to remain indecipherable, often for years on end, before eventually sinking back into the embrace of obscurity without ever reaching a conclusion. These artifacts can come from strange and confusing backgrounds, often as inexplicable as the videos themselves. One such example of this is a clip, supposedly found footage and almost a decade old, of a man struggling to come to terms with a hallucinogenic drug trip that has no end. Today, I will be taking a look into persistent trip. Now, before we get into this, I will mention that Scare Theater did a very good analysis of this video about a year ago. I'm probably going to cover some of the same points that he did, but I'll try to contribute new takes and ideas. I'm going to take a logical approach to this mystery so I can determine its most likely origins. First, let's deconstruct the video itself. The main upload of the video is entitled Persistent Trip, Datura. The video was uploaded by a user named Amos Namore on August 14th, 2012, and in that time it's racked up a little over 237,000 views. The content of the video is brief but disturbing. A disheveled, shirtless man sits in his room and turns on a low-res camcorder. He then speaks for about 2 minutes, appearing somewhat disturbed and agitated all the while, about his drug trip. What makes his description unusual, however, is his statement that he hasn't come down from the high for over 2 months. He states that he hasn't been able to go outside much and has stayed in his basement most of the time. The man almost never makes eye contact with the camera and seems overall to be very uncomfortable. He ends his statement with an unnerving prediction.
I don't feel like I'm ever gonna come down. And it's not cool. It's getting weird. It's definitely getting weird.
The man remains surprisingly collected despite his apparent circumstances, but he still appears quite uneasy as he describes his situation. Around the video's start, the man mentions that the date is March 5th, 2008, almost 4.5 years prior to Amos Namore's upload of the video. On the shelf behind the man is what many have claimed is a handgun. However, the quality of the video makes it impossible to really tell. And that's all we can really glean from the video itself. The rest of our info comes from the video uploader. Amos claims that he is in fact not the man in the video, nor is he even the original uploader. According to the video description, Persistent Trip was apparently uploaded to YouTube by an unknown user who claimed to have found the footage on an abandoned camcorder. Amos, after discovering the video had been taken down, decided to re-upload it in 2012. Interestingly, a second upload of the video by a user named Dizzy Duck went up on December 18th of the same year, although it has only a fraction of the views. Dizzy's description corresponds with Amos's, with more detail. According to him, the camcorder was found on a park bench in Philadelphia. Both of these uploaders seem to agree that this video was said to be found footage, and most importantly, they both seem to believe that the man in the video is under the influence of Datura, a hallucinogenic flowering plant. Let's talk about Datura itself. Datura refers to 9 species of poisonous flowering plants native to the Americas. Often confused with angel's trumpets, Datura flowers are also commonly known as thorn apples and Jimson weeds. Datura plants are notable for 2 major properties: their toxicity and their use as psychoactive drugs. All species of Datura contain tropane alkaloids that make them exceedingly toxic in large doses, to the point that the plant is used commonly as a method of poisoning for suicide and murder. More relevant to our investigation, however, is the fact that in small doses, the plant proves to be a potent hallucinogen. This is likely the reason why Amos and Dizzy both believe the man in the video had taken Datura. Although this assessment seems to make sense at first glance, it quickly crumbles under further investigation. For one, it doesn't make much sense that out of the vast catalog of hallucinogens, the man would choose to take Datura. You see, unlike most other psychoactives, Datura has an almost universally negative reputation. The vast majority of Datura users reported the experience to be physically and mentally painful, and its potentially toxic effects make it all the more dangerous to consume. Furthermore, as was pointed out by Scare Theater in his video, the man's actions and description of his drug do not line up with known symptoms and preparation of Datura. The man describes, quote, boiling the roots at one point. This would make no sense if the man was taking Datura. Common methods of ingestion include eating seeds, drinking a tea made from the leaves, and even smoking or rubbing ground material from the flowers. However, boiling the roots is something never discussed. On top of that, the man's behavior, while a little off-kilter, is relatively subdued. If an ordinary hallucinogen had been at fault, this would be relatively standard. However, this is not the case. Datura belongs to a subcategory of hallucinogens known as deliriants. Deliriants are a far more serious matter than standard psychedelics, inducing agitation, confusion, dysphoria, and extremely vivid hallucinations that are indistinguishable from reality. As was said by Scare Theater, the behaviors of individuals on deliriants are highly unusual and immediately noticeable. Datura in particular induces an extremely vivid anticholinergic delirium. The man's calm, composed actions and persistent trip are certainly a far cry from deliriant-induced episodes. So, if the man is not under the influence of Datura as the videos claim, what has he taken? Once again, I would have to agree with Scare Theater's assessment on the matter. A surprisingly small number of hallucinogenic plants are taken through ingestion of the roots, notably ayahuasca, sassafras, and mandrake. Due to the man's specific mention of boiling the roots, ayahuasca seems the most believable option. Ayahuasca contains several alkaloids which act as oxidase inhibitors, allowing the body to fully absorb the drug's more well-known ingredient, DMT. Ayahuasca has been used as a psychedelic for thousands of years in South America, and based on the man's descriptions and actions, seems the most likely culprit for his symptoms. And now, before we discuss the supposed persistent trip itself, let's set up a quick timeline of events. If every statement on the two uploads is to be believed, the chain of events would go something like this. On March 5th, 2008, a man records himself discussing his 2-month drug trip. He then leaves his camcorder on a park bench in Philadelphia. Somewhere between March 2008 and August 2012, an unknown YouTube user finds the footage and uploads it to YouTube before taking it down. On August 14th and December 18th, 2012, respectively, Amos Namore and Dizzy Duck re-upload the video after finding it gone. And that's it. The timeline is brief, but it'll help us determine the video's legitimacy further down the line. With that out of the way, I'll try to consider all the possible reasons for the man's persistent trip. A number of these were originally brought up by Scare Theater. For one, the man could simply have an underlying mental condition such as schizophrenia that leads him to believe he's been tripping for 2 months. The man could be experiencing temporal dilation, a known effect of psychedelics such as DMT that leads users to believe large amounts of time have passed, even when they haven't. An unusual but entirely possible explanation is that the man could be suffering from hallucinogen persisting perception disorder, an affliction that affects a very small portion of drug users and causes them to experience psychedelic effects for long after they stop tripping. The effects of HPPD are dissimilar to an actual trip, mostly consisting of strange visuals with no real mental intoxication. However, if the man had little experience with psychedelics, it is possible that he could be experiencing lingering effects of HPPD and believing his symptoms to be evidence of an endless trip. While tenuous, it is a legitimate possibility. And finally, the most commonly reported and easiest answer is that the whole video is nothing more than a hoax, an admittedly well-acted but ultimately false production. And this brings us to our final question. Often when presented with a video like this, we immediately want a black and white answer. Is it real or is it a hoax? However, in reality, the answer is often a lot more nuanced. With this video in particular, determining its legitimacy is difficult due to the number of points along its journey where a hoax could have been perpetrated. To keep organized, we'll go over 4 distinct scenarios that may have happened. Scenario 1. It's all real. In 2008, a man recorded himself legitimately believing he had been tripping for 2 months for any of the reasons mentioned previously. He then left his camcorder on a bench, which was found by an unknown user who uploaded it to YouTube, after which it was taken down and re-uploaded by Amos and Dizzy. This scenario assumes everything said is true and that there was no foul play at any point, which would be interesting but is highly unlikely. Scenario 2. In 2008, a man records himself believing that he has been tripping for 2 months. However, he does not leave his camera on a park bench and the footage is not found by an unknown YouTube user. Rather, the man either was the original uploader or the original uploader came across the footage through some other means. The video was uploaded and the original uploader created a fictional story about finding the footage on a park bench, which Amos and Dizzy then re-uploaded after it was taken down. This is a scenario that I find to be one of the more plausible. In any scenario, the whole found footage concept seems contrived and unlikely. However, the fact that Amos and Dizzy described very similar but slightly differing stories about how the footage was found leads me to think it was quite possible that an original upload did exist at some point in time, and the 2 re-uploaders simply remembered it differently. Many have claimed this is impossible, as no evidence can be found of an original upload, but think about this. The current video uploaded by Amos has over 200,000 views, and with the exception of a Reddit post and a Scare Theater video, almost nothing can be found on it as well. And this is a video that has been up for almost a decade and has existed into the modern age of YouTube, where information spreads much faster. If the original upload existed between 2008 and 2012, YouTube's formative years, and was soon deleted, it's entirely possible that only a handful of viewers even saw it. So, whether the original uploader came across the footage through some other means or was in fact the man in the video, I believe it's quite likely he simply fabricated a found footage narrative, after which Amos and Dizzy simply took the bait. Scenario 3. In 2008 or around that time, a man records a video of himself discussing a 2-month trip. However, the man is making the whole thing up. He records the video as a hoax, hoping some internet users will believe it, and he gets his wish. The original uploader, Amos, and Dizzy all believe the video to be real and upload it over the next few years. The flaw in this scenario is that nothing further has come out about the man in the video in the decade since its recording. And finally, Scenario 4. It's all one big hoax. This scenario states that the man never had his trip and that there was no original upload of the video. Amos Nomore simply recorded the video himself, created a false story about there being an original upload, and posted the video. Dizzy found the video a few months later and chose to upload it for whatever reason. This theory is, again, one of the more likely, and it's easy to accept this as the true explanation. However, like with every other scenario, it has its own set of weak points. For one, Amos's behavior regarding the video doesn't line up with most hoax YouTube videos. Amos's channel features a wide variety of miscellaneous content, and after uploading Persistent Trip, he simply continued uploading his assorted videos before stopping in 2012. He made no attempt to spread the word about the video, and made no follow-ups of any kind. If this was simply a hoax perpetrated by Amos Nomore, it wasn't a very good one. And one final thing to note about Amos's channel, and possibly the reason he believed that drug referenced in Persistent Trip to be Datura, is that his very first upload was an Inside Report segment on the dangers of Jimson weed, a common name for Datura. Whether this has a correlation to Persistent Trip or is simply a coincidence is anyone's guess. So, in conclusion, we can roughly determine that the man in Persistent Trip is likely either suffering from HPPD or some mental condition, experiencing temporal dilation, or is simply acting a part for a hoax. Many have pointed to the handgun behind the man as evidence that he plans to kill himself or others. However, it can't even be said for sure that this truly is a gun, and even if it is, it's unclear whether the man would actually use it. The video itself may or may not be a re-upload, depending on whether Amos Nomore's claims can be trusted. And the video itself is simply quite difficult to analyze due to the lack of information and the multiple layers involved in its inception. A number of theories and explanations can be proposed, but as with so many of the videos and phenomena just like this one, it's impossible to really know until the truth comes to light. Thanks for watching.